Well, we've had our series looking and hearing from MLCs, and we thought we'd finish as we started with the Bishop. We're going to finish with the Bishop. Now the discussion is about being a member of the Legislative Council. So we better get into this. Do you get paid? Do you get the whole privileges and expenses like everybody else up there, you know, on the higher shelf?
I don't get paid.
Right.
I do get the expenses, and what I do with those essentially is to return them back to the government at the end of the year.
Would you see the whole system being changed, though, or do you not get involved in that side of things?
I think in a way that's a question for others to answer rather than for me. I mean, I'm aware that my colleagues in Legislative Council will have other demands on them that I don't have. I have demands that they may not have. Therefore, I spend a lot of time doing wider work for the Church of England as well. So the expenses that come to me, for example, if there were direct expenses involved in being a member of the Legislative Council, I could presumably use that grant for those purposes. But actually, in the end, I've just given the money back to the government at the end of the year, and that's what I would do. But I can accept that for other people, the circumstances would be different.
Do you feel there's a place for the Bishop in government, unelected?
I think there is. It's a place that has to be understood, I think, with care, with caution, with sensitivity. It is unelected, which makes it unique. And some people would say that's incongruous. We had, as we said earlier, that very interesting discussion, the debate in Tynwald last year. And I think it was felt, and other people have expressed this, that there is a place for someone who is unelected, therefore not beholden to the electorate, therefore able to bring an independent perspective, provided that is exercised with what I've described as humility and care.
Well, of all the times to become the Bishop, you enter with the abortion business coming up massively, and what a polarisation, and running the gauntlet outside with those images from people who have got views, very definite views, that should be no abortion. You're a Christian man and you believe the Bible, I'm guessing. How do you juggle all that and have a view that isn't just purely religious, or is that too big a question for you? I mean, can you think as somebody independently, or do you have to vote with your heart from the Bible?
I think not just from the Bible, but I think from what the wider Christian tradition has said, and that has always been important to me. So in that particular debate, the issue for me was about what it means to be a human being. And the question of when life begins is not just an academic question. We know that it isn't that. We know that life begins before birth. And that was why I was keen to bring in people who had experience, for example, in neonatal care or in midwifery, to talk to the Legislative Council about that. And I was pleased to do that. And whilst that didn't change any outcome, nonetheless, I think it gave an extra layer to the debate, to the discussion, an extra level. And indeed, members of Legislative Council said that to me on that day, that we had broadened the discussion, we'd taken it into a further dimension, we had considered what it means to be a human being, and that struck me as being really, really important. And I'd say that with issues to do with the beginning of life and the end of life. These are significant questions about what it means to be a human being and what responsibility the state can take on behalf of individual human beings.
How do you think the debate went and the outcome, which is the law will be changed? Well, as long as it gets royal assent. At the time of recording this, we're still waiting for that.
Indeed. I think that was the outcome that was anticipated.
Did you think that was going to be the outcome?
I think that was a likely outcome.
And how do you feel about that?
I think I would have wished perhaps that we had been able to set thresholds slightly differently. And I had a particular concern, and I still have a particular concern about the way in which there is no provision for the disabled within that bill. The fact that actually abortion because of disability in the case of something like Down's syndrome is still possible up to term. And I felt that was a part of the debate that could have had greater scrutiny.
But it's had so much scrutiny. I mean, this bill has gone back and forth, and people have really gone over it. Are you relaxed? It is about to come along then. I mean,
yes.
And can you live with it? You know,
one lives with these things. Sure. Indeed, I live as a member of society, and therefore I accept what society does. I sometimes try to shape people's thinkings if I think there is an insight from the spiritual tradition that can be brought to bear. I felt there was in the case of disability, for example, but actually, if that doesn't change people's minds, then that's what we live with.
People had to run the gauntlet, as I said, of Abort 67. Your thoughts on that sort of demonstration / wanting to not do anything and live literally to have no abortion at all?
I think for me, if I'm going to be part of the Legislative Council, if I'm going to exercise a role within the parliamentary process, then that must be exercised through a rational discussion and debate. It must be exercised through those channels, and therefore, whilst clearly there are some things that one feels very, very strongly about, there are different ways in which you can respond to that. There's a place for the person who stands outside and demonstrates, of course there is, and without righteous demonstration, many important reforms wouldn't have happened. There is a place for that, clearly there is. There's also a place for discussing it within the parliamentary process, and that's the role that I have been asked to occupy. Okay. And that was my role in that discussion.
Okay. We'll park that, because obviously, first of all, you've been there long enough to see the influx of the new brigade coming in, and 5 women coming in. What's your views on the mix now and how it's working up there?
I think I preface that, if I may, by saying as soon as I arrived here, my first encounter with Tynwald Court, I was hugely impressed. I thought this is a wonderful thing to be part of, and to be able to have a discussion about these things that affect everyday people's lives, every aspect of people's lives. And I think, in fact, the first discussion that we had on my first morning had to do with dog licences. And that's really important, because how we look after people's pets is part of how we look after people, and to be involved in that is a great privilege, and I still feel that. I mean, there was that significant changeover, as you say, probably in March of last year within the Legislative Council, some new elections. I think we have a group of people who work very well together, who will bring different experiences, different perspectives, and that's the richness of the political mix.
Okay. How important is this mix to you then? I mean, this may be in the previous interview really more than this one, about how much of your time is Legislative Council, how much time are you the bishop, or do you not even know?
I think, I'm always the bishop,
yes.
if I can put it like that.
Yeah.
On Tuesdays, I'm the bishop who sits in Legislative Council or in Tynwald Court.
But you've got to find the time to go through all this, don't you? Don't you have to read all this stuff?
Indeed, you have to set aside time for the reading, very much, and take it seriously. But I would say that's part of the privilege of sitting there in Tynwald or in the LegCo. You have to give it the time that it deserves. That is part of this role. That was discussed at the interview process that we referred to earlier. And I acknowledge that it's a really important part of it. But I think properly so, and the idea of the bishop as part of public life, offering a spiritual perspective where one may be required, offering pastoral support where that may be helpful, offering wisdom from the Christian tradition in a society that is based on Christian principles, that's really important still.
And if the bishop wasn't a part of Legislative Council, this is probably a question outside your remit, but if in future it was removed, the Soda of Man wasn't there, do you think, well, there wouldn't be a Soda of Man? Do you think that's possible? Do you think it's important to the church to have you in there, to have this position?
I think it's seen as always having been a distinctive aspect of our life here, a distinctive aspect of the life of the island, of this diocese of Sodor and Man, is that the bishop in Tynwald has a clear voice. I think, yes, to take the bishop out of Tynwald, it wouldn't necessarily change our structures. I think it would probably change the ethos of it. So that I remind myself, people don't always want to hear the bishop talking on every possible subject. You're not always there to do that. And the idea of listening is a really important one, and speaking when there's something to say. So again, it's about exercising the role, I think, with what I've called humility.
And so, just finish with the watching the Tynwald progression and you being part of that. You're feeling at home in there. You've got something to contribute.
I very much hope so, and I think it's clear to me actually from some of the discussions that we've been having recently in Tynwald and elsewhere around issues to do with homelessness, to do with food poverty, the Christian Church and the welcoming, undemanding compassion that it brings still has and always will have a central role in our society.